Welcome to another edition of the Story Geeks show and the Story Geeks, the How Stories Work podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, I'll try and describe what's going to go on today. If you're watching, you get to watch along with me as we recap this latest episode, the fourth episode of the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones. Today will be a recap of both episodes that occur here. One that occurs with Leo Tolstoy in Russia, and then one that occurs between Indiana Jones and his father over in Greece. I will recap both things, and I will also get into the significance that these shows have in the character journey of Indiana Jones and the significance that these events have to his life. We'll start out by saying this. I have finally figured out what happened. I believe what happened here. It's a little bit confusing about how these were released. Originally, these came out on ABC in 1992 and 1993. There were two seasons. And I'm almost positive, based on the information that I've been able to collect, especially from Captain John D and from some other sources, what it looks like to me is that these episodes were posted as 45-minute or hour-long TV shows with ads, 45 minutes of worth of show. They were posted to ABC, and they were done not in chronological order. They were mixed up, is what I believe to be the case based on what I see on IMDb. At that point in time, they were called the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Well, then somewhere along the line, George Lucas has to redo all the stuff that he's ever created. And what he started doing was he started putting them in eras. So we have like Indiana Jones as a young man, then we have Indiana Jones sort of in the war and what that looks like, and then we have Indiana Jones post-war, is I believe the ways that these were resegmented, and they were edited too. Some things were edited out, some things were edited together, and effectively when they show up on Disney Plus, you get like 22 movies as opposed to 31 episodes plus a couple movies. It's a very confusing way of doing it. Sometimes in these episodes, what you'll find that Indy is supposed to go from one location to the next location, meaning that there was the intent that when Indy was a kid and he's on this journey with his father, they would go from Russia, in this case, Russia to Greece. And those two things flow together. But it's weird because the actor is clearly 8 years old in both episodes, and the transition period, he's like 10. So it doesn't really make sense. It's a weird kind of way of putting these things together, but I believe I have finally unlocked that portion of it. But let's get into the recaps. I'm going to recap this first episode with Leo Tolstoy in Russia, and then I'm going to recap Indy and his father in Greece, and then we'll get into the bigger implications of what these two episodes contribute to filling in Indiana Jones' backstory and why he is the way he is when we see him in the films. So like I said, we're going to start out in Russia, and essentially what happens in Russia is that Indy attends this party, and as he attends this party with his parents and with his nanny's sick, by the way. His nanny's getting sick. His parents attend this party, Henry and Anna Jones, and Indy gets himself into some major trouble. So every time Indy turns around, his parents want him to behave like he's part of the aristocracy, and yet he's messing around and he ruins something. So here he is about to ruin the cake at this wedding. So that is effectively what is happening in this episode. And then because of that, Indiana Jones gets yelled at by his dad. Now, this episode, when both things are put together, this episode is called Travels with Father. Okay. And the reason that's significant is because what they are trying to highlight here is Indiana Jones and his relationship with Henry. In this first episode, Indy gets yelled at by his father so badly that he actually just decides that he's going to run away. And so he does run away. So he's out here in the Russian countryside, and he meets none other than Leo Tolstoy, the author of War and Peace. And Leo Tolstoy happens to also be running away from his family. He's also in some trouble with the law because they don't really like what his views are or what some of his writings indicate about the system that he's under. This would have been pre-World War I Russia. And Indy and Tolstoy actually have a fairly contentious relationship to start out with. They aren't really getting along, but over the course of time, Tolstoy kind of explains to Indy that his Bible is his greatest possession. Indy says that his baseball cards are his greatest possession. They share some relationship there. And eventually they kind of start to become friends. They go to some various villages. If you're watching along with me on YouTube, you can see some of the shots I've got here from the show on Disney Plus. If you're listening, basically they go to these remote Russian villages, but Tolstoy is being hunted down so that he can be basically imprisoned for some of the stuff that he said. There's a one point in time in this particular episode, which I really liked, where Indiana Jones stands up for Tolstoy when these two goons, well, they're not goons, they're government officials. They're like the police or the army. They show up, and Indiana Jones is like, we can say whatever we want to, thinking that free speech is the thing. But of course, in Russia at this time, free speech is not a thing. So Tolstoy grows to appreciate that about Indy. And then Tolstoy kind of gets beat up, and he's not real healthy to begin with, but Indy has to then save Leo Tolstoy. After he saves Leo Tolstoy, they basically both decide that they are going to exchange gifts with one another, so to speak, and they do so. Leo Tolstoy gives Indiana Jones his Bible, his most prized possession, and Indiana Jones gives Leo Tolstoy his baseball cards. And I'll get to the implications of what that means, what this episode means for Indiana Jones and his journey. But let's first take a look at the second episode in episode. This is called episode 4. Contains 2 episodes of TV to create this mini movie, essentially this hour-and-a-half movie. And as you can see here, they go from Russia to Greece. Now, in this journey, Mrs. Seymour, who is Indy's nanny and his educator, she educates Indy along the way. She gets sick, and so when they pull into Athens, Anna, his mother, already has plans, and so she says, Henry, you've got to take Indy to wherever you're going. And it just so happens that Henry is going to a monastery. He's going to study there. He's going to give some educational talks there as well. And Indy and Henry decide that they are going to go do this together. Henry does not want to do this with Indy with him. He thinks that Indy's going to be a pain, and he doesn't want to go with him. Well, as they go ahead and go through this process, everything starts to break down. So first of all, Indy doesn't want to be there. Second of all, Henry doesn't want Indy to be there. They get into these big discussions about what Indy should be doing etiquette wise, what he should be learning. And then of course his dad is angry with him, but they start to kind of develop a little bit more of a relationship. If you're watching along on YouTube, you can see what Sean Connery's younger self looks like. This is obviously not Sean Connery; it's played by another actor, but this is the character who is Henry Jones, is also played by Sean Connery later in The Last Crusade. They hit the road. They get mixed up with their taxi. They have a taxi that's taking them around to Greece. They get mixed up, and they end up going for a little swim here in Greece. And as you can see in this photo here, it doesn't go so well. They go swimming, and lo and behold, the goats are eating their clothes. And while they're swimming, the goats are eating their clothes, and then they have to run up the beach. And of course, George Lucas has to be a little cheeky. I'm being cheeky myself in saying this. That is a pun, because Indiana Jones and his father literally run up the beach with their bare asses hanging out. So there you go. If nobody ever wanted to see Indiana Jones, but there you go. They go to another village. They get some extra clothes. They go to the monastery. While they're at the monastery, Indy learns a little bit more about how his father is holding him to a high standard. He meets another person who's studying there at the monastery who helps him complete a task that his father assigned, and his father is actually pretty impressed by that. On the way, when they're leaving the monastery, they actually get trapped in the elevator. They have an elevator that's basically just one of these rope ones that you pull up, and they get trapped in that elevator, which is of course terrifying. And so they have some bonding moments there. So even though they haven't been getting along, there are some bonding moments between the two of them. The elevator eventually falls to the ground, and they have to climb all the way back up to the top. And it's so what do we learn from these two episodes? That's basically the episodes. Indiana Jones saves Leo Tolstoy, and then he and his father have this interaction that ends up being, a bonding experience. So what do we learn from this? Well, we learn a couple things. One, Indiana Jones is portrayed as very American, as he is in the films. Here, he's talking to Leo Tolstoy about freedom of speech, and he's learning a little bit more from Tolstoy about what it means to believe in something so much that you would go against your society in order to put what you think out into the world. And he learns that. He also learns the importance of reconnecting with family, even though you may not agree with them and you may be uncomfortable with them. But later on in the episode, he also learns, because Henry is really upset when Indiana Jones is lost. So his mom, and so is Mrs. Seymour, his nanny. So what we learn in the second episode is that Henry and Indy do not think alike. Henry has a Scottish upbringing. I believe it's Scottish. He's from the UK. And Indy has an American upbringing, and he's very American. Like I said, he's learning about free speech. He wants to promote free speech. His dad is a little bit more like, we just concentrate on what pertains to us. We don't get involved in other people's business, but Indy very much gets involved in other people's business, as he will later on in the film. So he very much acts out against his father, and they have this kind of misunderstanding of one another as characters. And that's going to move forward into the films. And in The Last Crusade, we really get to see that. In fact, I just watched The Last Crusade again. We're going to do a full show on The Last Crusade, which would be really fun. And in this episode, you can kind of see Indy and Henry do not see the world the same way, and therefore they have a hard time having a relationship with one another as father and son, which we're going to see in The Last Crusade. All in all, pretty interesting episodes. This was probably one of my favorite of the Young Indiana Jones episodes thus far. And I have one or two more that I'm going to talk about before we get into a little bit older of Indiana Jones, and he starts getting involved in the war and things like that. So plenty of good stuff to come. There's two ways to get involved in this show. You can watch on Orange Grove 55's YouTube channel. The Story Geek Show is now over on Orange Grove 55's network of shows. We are one of the shows that you can watch there. You can also watch Citrus Corner with George, and Freshly Squeezed. Actually, I think it's Freshly Squeezed with Dre. Hopefully I'm getting that right. Dre is super good at saying these things, and I need like a script to be able to say them. You can also catch the Story Geek shows here as well as the original OG Orange Grove 55's Orange Nerd show. So be sure to check those out. Also, over on How Stories Work, I'm doing some other shorter videos there as well. So you can see some more things about Indiana Jones. I've made a whole playlist. You can watch all the Indiana Jones content that's coming out, because I think we're going to have over 20 videos. We may have over 30 videos, but one of the things I'm really working on is larger podcasts and shows where we invite some more guests on to talk about the films. And that will be fantastic. You do not want to miss that. If you want recaps of these Young Indiana Jones, it used to be called Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, be sure to check them out on the How Stories Work podcast or here on Orange Grove 55. One of the things I've also been promoting as I've been doing shows is that while I'm doing all of these things, I'm also trying to film a short film this year. And if you want to help us support that short film, be sure to check out the links in the description. They might not be in the description of this video, but they'll definitely be in the links will be in the description of the videos on How Stories Work with Jay Sherer. And we are super appreciative of everybody who contributes to that movie. It's going to be really fun. It's a superhero thriller, and it'll be fantastic. In fact, I'm hopefully talking to somebody who can help me with casting this next week. So thanks for joining in. I hope you enjoyed this series. Let me know if you want any other Indiana Jones content in the comments down below, and I will see you on the next show.